And we are live. Welcome back, everybody. If Welcome back to my channel. If you're new, please like and subscribe. And today we have a very special guest with us, and I'm gonna let her introduce herself in a moment. But before we go, we're gonna just kind of check in. How is everybody feeling on this new moon? New moon started a couple nights ago, but I checked outside; it still looked new to me. So I like to hear from you all in the chat. How's everything going? How are you? And tonight we're going to be talking about a very important, very sensitive topic that is often overlooked or not quite, it's like, it's a very serious issue that people just kind of gloss over, but I think it needs some more in-depth talk and more in-depth study. And we have another special guest with us. There he is,
The
Dr.
man
Dennis
of the hour.
Winkler. Yes. Greetings, greetings. So we're going to talk tonight and about a topic of childhood trauma and identifying and exploring ways to heal. We hear a lot of talk about this, but we're going to talk about um, how it impacts us, how to identify it, and also explore ways to heal from it and some coping strategies. So our guests tonight are the lovely Queen Kendra Langley, and we're going to make her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about herself, and Dr. Dennis Ausar Winkler of the Temple of New African Thought. Welcome, welcome you both. So let's start with Queen Kendra, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello everyone. I am Kendra, and I thank you to right. Thank you, Tamar, for having me on tonight. Um, and pleasure to meet you, Dr. Dennis. Well, I am a former foster youth. I grew up in Prince George's County,
Mhm.
and I had a long gambit in going in and out of foster care, and just really coming into my own self through this process, and just being groomed through various people that has been brought into my life to bring me into a leadership role, and which is really, I guess, how I kind of been on this path for a very long time, uh, which kind of brings me here. I'm a mother of three and a cat, um, and a partner and an entrepreneur. I'm a hairstylist. I not only style the masses, but I also heal the masses as well.
Mhm.
And so I'm just here for all the deep conversation and just dive into it.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for
Thank
having me.
you. Thank you. And Dr. Dennis Asar Winkler. It's okay if I call you Dr. Asar?
Mm,
Okay, good, good, good. So can you introduce yourself and tell
greetings.
us a little bit about yourself this evening?
Okay, greetings. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you now.
All right. Greetings to you and Sister Kendra. My name is Dennis Asar Winkler. I am the founder of Tina Holistic Wellness Center. I'm I guess, a lifelong entrepreneur. Also a psychotherapist and researcher as pertains to my research is on, I'll just give you my research is on race-based trauma, black identity and spirituality, the relationship between those, but also I research trauma specifically. Very trauma informed, especially related to the African American community, but not just the African American black community, but not even just the black community, just trauma in general.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. Born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, and I mean, just really a lifelong entrepreneur, student of life.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. So we are all here in the DMV, and we're going to get right into the discussion. And trauma, according to the definition, is a deeply definition from Oxford Dictionary, is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And it can also be a physical injury. That's another definition. So when we hear the words trauma, what comes to mind to me is something um, some form of tragedy or some form of loss or some kind of pain. And childhood trauma is one of the number one things as a holistic healer that I see most of my clients that come to me. And when we start talking about something that's bothering them, or what issue is it that they want assistance with, it always goes back to some painful childhood experience or experiences that shape some aspect of their life or all aspects of their life, and it was never fully healed, never dealt with, or sometimes never acknowledged, and it just kind of like follows you around almost like a dead corpse. I mean, like attached to you. And so that is why I wanted to talk about this issue tonight, because also myself, I experienced a lot of distress and trauma growing up as a young person. And some of the stuff took years to heal from. And so I wanted to talk about and, just define or what are the different types of trauma for child, what are different types of trauma that we experience during childhood.
Well, I guess I could talk on that.
Okay.
Some of the traumas that I experienced in my childhood, I went through just about every form of abuse that a child could go through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I would say that some of the side effects of that definitely was depression.
Yeah.
Sometimes, it was, I believe at one point in my childhood, you can say I would just kind of have my own coping mechanisms of how I handled stress.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I was placed in a stressful situation, how I would respond to that. And even oftentimes find myself to be numb.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and also because I was raised by my grandmother, that generation of people, our grandparents' generation, and so on, they grew up in a hush hush generation, and so therefore there was a lot of things that weren't discussed, or there were a lot of things that that may have happened, and they were likely to sweep it under the rug because they were not themselves ready to address it.
Yes.
And that was a trickle down to our parents, and then and of course to our generation. And so going through that and seeing that, um, it definitely affected me in a way. Um, but the way I dealt with it probably was a lot different. Not to say I was angry. I was very angry. I had a temper.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I will say that the way I dealt with it over the years was really through my own spiritual self. I didn't pay much attention in church. I actually talked majority of the time, and I was coloring and in trouble. But somehow, uh, my spirituality, it was something that kind of chose me,
Mm-hmm.
and that is what kept me mentally strong through
Mm-hmm.
those circumstances. I still went through everything. I went through every step that a person who can go through a trauma could go through. Denial, not loving yourself, even sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And sexual abuse is how we treat ourselves, not even so much of how other people treat us, but how we treat ourselves and what we see ourselves as.
Mm-hmm.
And and really just that whole identity crisis of who am I, and
Yes.
am I my situation, and wanting to blame everyone around me for everything that was happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been a long journey for me. Definitely feel like lifetimes ago, and yet and still we still work through a lot of that trauma, but just really coming to the point of accepting the fact that um, I am not my situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the decisions that you make today ultimately determines your future, not your past.
Absolutely. Yes. And you kind of also answered the next question I wanted to talk about. Identifying, the question was identifying the symptoms of the trauma. But one of the things you mentioned, you experience all forms of abuse. Um, there are also forms of trauma that is a lot of times is not discussed, especially when I was growing up. You didn't hear a lot about neglect, and I saw and myself and witnessed a lot of neglect growing up, and that wasn't seen as an abuse or harm to children, but I did witness a lot of that. And the abandonment issues, a lot of us have that because some of us have been abandoned by one or more parents. And sometimes you may have parents who are physically in the home with you or family members, but emotionally they're not there, or there's like a emotional detachment. Sometimes our parents are emotionally immature. They don't know how to address, specific needs that a child has emotionally. They may not be giving and loving or nurturing in that way. They may provide lots of care, lots of material surroundings and items, but there's that level of nurturing or emotional bonding and things that a child may need, and oftentimes that gets neglected. So I was going to ask Dr. Ausar if you could speak on some of the different forms of trauma.
Oh, okay. Greetings. I want to first kind of like look at, like, create a conceptualization of how I see trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And this is through my research, and I tend to agree with it. So when we look at trauma, sometimes we look at trauma as the event itself. I want to tease this out and say trauma is not necessarily the event. The event is a traumatic event. However, trauma is what is the response to the negative event. Trauma is a more intense form of stress. And if I define stress, I want to say stress is a negative emotional experience in which there is a biochemical, physiological, cognitive, and behavioral change which attempts to adapt to that stressor. So, in fact, when we've been through some trauma, it's just us trying to adapt to whatever that event is. Hence, we're left with some level of stress. Many times, if the stress is overwhelming, we feel like we couldn't defend ourselves. We feel
Mm-hmm.
like we were defenseless.
Mm-hmm.
Then we become what is known as traumatized.
Yeah.
So the different types of trauma, I would say that trauma shows up in so many different ways. And that which is a traumatic event to one person is not necessarily a traumatic event to another,
Mm-hmm.
or it doesn't traumatize them at least. But all
Mm-hmm.
right, so different types of trauma. You have physiological traumas, you have psychological traumas, you have, those are traumas. But then you have abuse, which can cause trauma. You have somebody could fall off a sidewalk
Mm-hmm.
and be traumatized, where someone else can be thrown out of a window and not be. So
Mm-hmm.
almost anything that puts the body through a severe level of stress and you find it difficult to adapt to it can become a traumatizing experience.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Now you mentioned that how a person adapts to extreme stress, and a lot of times when people have certain negative behaviors, is their way of adapting to not, the feelings of powerlessness or the feelings of abuse and neglect. Like sometimes when you feel you have no recourse, or if you're under constant extreme stress, you will, your first reaction will be anger. I know that's what I used to struggle with. My first reaction when something would happen or someone would say something to me that I didn't like, my first reaction was anger.
Mm-hmm.
What is that an expression of the trauma?
It can be.
Okay.
So
Okay.
lots of times when we are angered, as some would say, we're being triggered
Mm-hmm.
many times.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we're angered because it's reminding of us of some unsafe time, right? Or as some people say, if we are hysterical, it's probably historical.
Mm.
So there's some history there that may be brought up, and the body may remember that. So many times, even psychological trauma has is we feel it on a physiological level. They
Mm-hmm.
have a book called "The Body Keeps the Score." You probably heard of it before.
No, I
Um,
haven't. Write it down.
the body keeps the score. So even what we call psychological trauma really affect us on a physiological level, and it changes the way that we experience the world. It
Yes.
changes the way that that our neurons fire and all these type of things.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we don't even know why we're angry. Some people say, I don't even know why I was angry, until we can really tap into and say, what was going on? I was fearful. When we dealt with trauma, typically we don't feel safe. When we were overwhelmed, we didn't know what to do, and it takes us back to those times, and we do anything to fight and not experience that again.
Yeah,
So I think I hope I answered your question.
I think you did. I think you did. Yes, Kendra, did you want to speak on that?
Well, I what I was getting from what Dr. Dennis was saying, that is the PTSD response, the post traumatic stress disorder response. And that usually is what he's speaking on, when your body, it's like a muscle memory. It's almost like a knee
Mm-hmm.
jerk.
Mm-hmm.
And that is your body's way of preparing for whenever you feel that something is coming, or if you've been somebody curse you out for leaving the refrigerator open, and you walk around the corner and somebody's standing at that refrigerator and they looking at you and you ready to snap. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if you've gone through some things, you're ready to snap because your muscle memory is, okay, prepare for fight. It's fight or flight.
Right.
And that is something that a lot of people who go through traumatic situations
Mm-hmm.
experience. And that's just that they always find a need to have to fight. Thus, where when I say we, I speak for those who may have gone through a sense of trauma, um, whether you healed or not, is that you are ready to call. It's like a call to action button. And it's
Mm,
something
Yep.
that you have in place so that you can protect yourself, because sometimes for a lot of people, sometimes the anger is a safety vest, a safety blanket. um and then also going even deeper, and how, and how the spirit retains. I believe we spoke about this before, Tamar, about how, I can't remember if it was you and I or someone else, but when we go through things, we leave a piece of ourselves in that room, and people don't really understand the true essence
Mhm.
of energy and how it really works.
Yes.
So when you go through these traumas, a lot of times the people who traumatize you are people who are not healed themselves.
mhm,
As you said, we're raised, when you have children living in a home, when we experience this neglect, we experience the abuse, the verbal abuse, the physical abuse. And if for some people, the sexual abuse, you find that they too themselves have experienced these things.
Mm-hmm.
And thus, when it's a trickle down effect,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next generation experience that. And so these are souls that are not healed, that are
Mm-hmm.
then having children, and they themselves are not just physiologically immature or chronologically immature, but they're spiritually immature. They have not healed yet, and they have
Yeah.
not grown to understand how to handle situations of conflict,
Mm-hmm.
or how to care for a child, because they haven't cared for themselves. So therefore, when they leave these situations and there's other people involved, i.e., children or even an adult, because people go through abusive relationships. They leave a piece of themselves in that room, or a piece of themselves in that conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not a healed or positive piece of themselves. And we pick that
True.
up.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
I ain't gonna preach too much. I'm gonna let y'all talk.
No, but you did that's bringing me to the next statement or question is about years ago when my children went to a charter school. I went to a parenting class. They had a parenting class. It was like a 6 week, 4 or 6 week class with uh I think he's a psychotherapist too, Nana Quabbin and Brown. And so I went to it, and I had never been to a parenting class. My children were still in elementary school. And I said, well, let me give it a try, because I mean, you take a class on everything else. Why not parenting? And he said something in the class, the very first class. He said that, the way, according to research, the way you are, the way you raise a child will affect the next 7 generations. And he said the way that many of us were raised was the same way our parents probably were raised, their parents, the grandparents, and it just goes down from generation to generation to generation. So we're passing down habits, good or bad. And so, like you said, that the person has their, has a part of them has been wounded, and they leave a part of them in, in that wound, that space where the wound, took place. And so it's all these wounded people passing down more wounds to the next generation and the next generation. And so, what do you all have to say about that statement, that the way you raise your child affects the next several generations? So when I heard him say that, I said, well, whoa, I got to get this right. I got
Well,
to get this right.
well, I can speak on my. I just actually had we had a little sister cipher with one of my older sisters and I and her friends.
Mm-hmm.
And we discussed that, and we were talking about our kids. We're talking about how it's the ghetto sometimes. I mean, listen, it don't matter how healed you are, it don't matter how much you've come. Listen, kids gonna be ghetto, okay? And
Yeah.
they're going to be kids. They're gonna be exactly what they are. However, one of the things that I will say is, we try to be, once we go through our process and we work on ourselves, we try to do this whole healed parenting thing,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to do things differently, trying to do it right,
Exactly.
but our kids don't seem to pick up what we trying to put down,
Mm-hmm.
and so, and it make you, it kind of make you feel like you got to go backwards. But
Mm-hmm.
um one of the things that I will say is that really stood out to me was, when we take the things that we've learned and
Mm-hmm.
we apply what we learn to our
Mm-hmm.
parenting, and we put it out there and we consistently put it out there, we
Mm-hmm.
commit to the change, and we commit to being the change that we want to see, and that's in our kids. And we just got to pray over them, because when we pray over them, what they're going to do, they're going to make their mistakes. That's all a
Mm-hmm.
part of growing. You try to grow them in your likeness, but they're going to make the mistakes that they're going to make, but they're going to always come back to those conversations. They're going to always come back to what they saw you do, not only just what you said.
Right.
And that is how they make those changes, so that when they have children and they grow up and they start their family, that they also teach what they do down. They teach what they were taught, and
Mm-hmm.
that is the generational secret. That is the recipe. That's the recipe in the cookbook that
Right.
they pass down to their children and their children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how to be a healed person. That is, even so simple as how to handle conflict resolution the right way, how to be a bigger
Yeah.
person, how to positively impact your community, how to be
Yeah.
a positive force in your own space, how to create your own space.
Mhm.
And
Right.
that is something that a lot of people themselves are struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe that how we parent ultimately can impact our children's children, but you just got to do the work, and you can't take your finger off the pulse. It's always going to be go time. It's training day
Yes.
every day.
It's every day.
Every
Yeah.
day.
Every day it is.
Hmm.
So
Dr. Star.
yeah, I would say that there's research on epigenetics that suggests that will support the notion that the future generations are affected by what has taken place to their grandparents even, and so there's research to support that. Now I don't know, just to be clear, I'm not sure how many generations, right? Some of that
Mhm.
is biblical or what have you, right? so
Okay.
so
Okay.
but nonetheless, it does affect. I don't even know if it stops at the seventh generation, but what I'm saying is, one of the things that I read in a book called My Grandmother's Hands by a dear brother named brother Resma Menicum. If you haven't read that book, I say we must read it.
Say the
Uh,
name again.
called My Grandmother's Hands. It it's about mending. I don't have the whole title, but the name of the book is My Grandmother's Hands, and it's by Resma Minicum. And what he talks about is the generational trauma, and generational trauma often showing up as culture at some point. And we know about our experience here in America, which now things is passed down as culture, but is in fact trauma. So hence is continuously being passed down, such as certain types of discipline styles, such
Right.
as certain habits and dietary styles, and certain communication patterns, the lack of communication or
Yes.
aggressive communication, or and even what we see, and many people probably won't identify this as a trauma, but even the overall compensation of trying to affirm ourselves, which creates a person who actually becomes a little, if I could say, narcissistic.
Narcissistic.
Yes.
Mhm.
So so we try to survive in society, and even in our community, narcissism is kind of high
Yeah.
because
Yes.
we've tried to build our esteem up. But we have to be careful with all of that. So it is passed down, our experience here in America, and just everybody's experience, and what their grandparents, their great great grandparents experienced. If we do not put a cog in the wheel will continue to turn.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yes, I agree, because
Yes.
I see that a lot in families, unhealthy patterns, and it's like you see the parents had some kind of unhealthy behavior, the great grandparents, the children, the grandchildren, even some people who didn't even grow up with their biological parents, they will still somehow adopt some of those behaviors. So it's almost like you said, it's almost like it's cultural to some degree. And at some point somebody has to be the one in the family that says, look, I'm going to break this cycle, whether it's abuse, neglect, abandonment, substance abuse, or whatever. And you see some families, it's like everybody's doing this same negative behavior,
Hmm.
and it's cyclical in a sense.
I would say it's a part of our culture though, because it's common for us to just say, I like it tough, give it to me straight. Just call me, tell me how it is. And I mean, this is what clients tell me when they come in, because they're used to somebody telling them something like it is, but I know they can't handle it. And
Right.
then then you're going to become defensive if I really tell you how it is. You know, but the thing is, we are used to a level of aggression that is not serving us. Maybe
Hmm.
it served us at a time, but even, I mean, I gotta throw them all out there. Throw Dr. Joy DeGrew's book out there, Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And even go to Dr. Naeem Akbaz, who talk about post traumatic experience that we experience here as Black people in America, being passed down, looking like culture,
Mhm.
looking like I'm trying to survive, I'm
Hmm.
trying to adapt, but when I'm trying to adapt, it's not always adaptive. Going back to your first question or second question, it's not always adaptive. Many times it's maladaptive. Maybe at times it's served, but there's lots of research that talks that they can show. And yeah, culture definitely is perpetuating the culture
Hmm.
that we have. The lives that we live is often perpetuating the trauma.
Yes, yes. And then Kendra mentioned something a few minutes ago about the older generation. I know I was raised, the elders that I was raised by, and the overwhelming consensus that I heard growing up was, what happens in your house stays in your house. You don't talk about what goes on in this house. This is our business. And even if it's something harmful, you're not
Hmm.
supposed to speak about it. And if you are talking about our business, quote unquote, it's like you're betraying the family.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this system kept a lot of harmful criminal behavior a secret, that and it scarred a lot of people for generations.
Hmm.
And At what point, what do you say to people that say things like this? At what point do you recognize? I mean, how do you help someone recognize that they or their family members need help? Because sometimes when I'm talking, I used to, be a school teacher, and I had, for example, one year I had a little girl who told me she was self-mutilating. She was in the 8th grade. She told me when she's at home, she will cut her hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, do you do this often? And she said, yeah, I started doing it when I get upset. And I said, and this child had deep depression, she told me. And I said, well, are you telling your mother and grandmother who she lived with? She said, no.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I think I should, let mom know what's going on. And so I called her mother and I told her mother. Her mother said, oh, she's fine. She's just going through something.
Hmm.
Yes, I agree with you. She's going through something. However, she's telling me she's doing stuff to hurt herself at home. That's we all go through things, but maybe she needs a little extra, like, could you talk to her? Is there somebody, you could have her talk to, try to, beat around the bush to say it delicately.
Mm.
Mom insisted it wasn't anything serious, that, she just going through something. She'll be fine. One day, a few months later, the little girl tell me she's going to commit suicide over the weekend. I was like, no, 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 we're not going to do that. I'm gonna call mama right now. So mom shows up. Mom's furious that she's late. She didn't come straight home from school. I said, well, she's here. We're talking to her, me and another teacher. And I said, she's late because we wouldn't let her go home because she said she was gonna kill herself. So we had to keep her here, make sure she was safe until you arrived. Mom just sobbing, sobbing, sobbing. She still insisted the child didn't need any help. And I'm like, how do you convey the message to people that certain behaviors, certain ways of maladaptive behavior needs help or needs assistance or needs therapy or counseling of some sort?
Some people are in denial.
Okay.
I talked to as a hair, I mean, I'm a hairstylist, but I guess you could say I'm a therapist in my
You're a
own right.
therapist too, yeah.
I encounter a lot of people on a
Mhm,
regular basis. I do families, and so when I hear things like that,
mhm,
or I have that experience with a child, or even a young adult,
mhm,
or adult, nobody's off the table at this point.
mhm,
I realize that when you talk, first of all, the biggest step for that person to do is to say it out loud. When you speak it out, you make it real, and usually when you speak it out, that's a call to action button that I need help. And I don't know I don't know what else to do. And so when you do go to a family member and then they give that response that the mom gave you, is usually because they don't know how to react to it. That is not a style that they've picked up along the way, probably from their parent.
mhm,
They're likely running from something themselves, which is usually some people whatever their failures may be or what they feel like their failures may be can
mhm.
affect the way that they parent and how receptive they are to those type of conversations.
Okay.
Some people are not ready to face the music because then that means that they will have to face their own conflict that they're struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there are a lot of families that, like you said, they just come from that hush generation. Well, they're
Mhm,
more upset that the child came to you and told you about that child's inner demons that they're struggling with, but they're not listening. And so I feel for someone who's gone through that myself,
mhm,
I personally went to my guidance counselor. I said this at 12. I said, I'm breaking this wheel. I'm shattering this wheel. I'm smashing this wheel. It will. I'm gonna go outside and somebody gonna know about something. I overshare.
mhm,
So it really takes for someone, if someone who's watching found themselves in a situation where someone came to them and that person, that caregiver, is not taking it seriously, then you have to go a step above, because
mhm,
it can be a matter of life and death.
mhm,
It can be a matter of that child could go home and get abused because of it.
mhm.
There somebody has to step outside of their usual institution and do a little bit more.
I agree. Good answer. Yes.
Well, as a school teacher
Mm-hmm.
today, and also as a any mandated reporter,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you, you have to break confidentiality at
Mm-hmm.
that point.
Yeah.
So with that, if the parents aren't listening, then you got to do what you got to do. Yeah,
Yes.
and then thirdly, I don't know if I had a secondly, but thirdly,
That was secondly. Yeah, that was secondly.
First, second, and third.
I think my brain is saying thirdly. So I've experienced, having to break my confidentiality at times, and this is a stigma. I think, as Sister Kendra was alluding to, lots of times what happens is, for me to see my child like that in that person's mind is like, what did I do wrong? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and and then not to mention the stigma of mental health in our community.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, and then is another thing. We also may not know how many times this child has done similar things or said similar things. But as Sister Kendra said, we must also take these things serious. Now, there's times when people tell me they want to hurt themselves and harm themselves, and most of the time I don't report
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have a plan, they don't have any intent, they don't have, any of these type of things. They just have thoughts. But what would keep you here? So not every time somebody says they want to harm themselves or they want to kill themselves, or not every time somebody cut themselves. That's just the only way they know how to cope right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some levels to it. If a person says I'm having thoughts, and I might not want to be here anymore, but I don't, so you ask them, like, will you do it? Sometimes people don't want to ask those direct questions, but people normally going to be honest with you, because when somebody's at that level, that state, that means they're probably really depressed. And
Yes.
if they're really depressed, then they'll tell you. And if they don't tell you, that means for the most part, they'll tell you. And if they don't tell you, is they'll say, well, no. Most of the time, they probably are still trying to figure things out. But for the most part, people will tell you if they're going to do it.
Yes.
You have access to it. All that type of thing. And so I'm very comfortable working with people. That was one of my fears, being a therapist. That um, what would I do if someone said that? And then I went to Job Corps and I got my training at Job Corps. And every Friday, as an intern, I was always handling a suicide, a threat. And so I become very comfortable in that, knowing that most people at that time won't do it, but you have to take it serious. You can ask some questions
Yes.
and all that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, in this particular instance, this child did have a plan. She had been planning it for a while,
Mm,
and things were building up. And then I guess she got to her breaking point because when um, she told a classmate who told me, and I asked her, "Is this true?" And she was very, unashamed of it. She was like, "Yeah, I'm done. I'm
hmm
finished. I don't want to do this anymore." And she had a whole plan how she was gonna carry it out when she got home. And we were negotiating with her and trying to convince her not to. And this took almost an hour, to convince her reasons to save her life, and why it was not a good idea to just end it now that what she was thinking of doing was a permanent solution to what could be a temporary problem.
hmm
And we had to take it seriously, and we had to get the not only the guidance counselor, there was a school social worker. We had to get them involved with the mother and everything. And so it was
Mm.
a situation. And those some other situations similar to that came up over my teaching career. But oftentimes when these issues or other issues with mental health will come up, we will often encounter, not always, but often encounter parents who were not responsive
hmm
or didn't have the appropriate response to their children's mental health issues, in particular suicide and other issues. It was, it was just unfortunate. And a lot of times it'll make me question, why are they reacting this way? Why are they responding this way? And it goes back to, well, what is their role in this? How were they raised? How were these issues addressed in their own upbringing? Are they just not cognizant that this is an issue? This is a serious issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The neglect, the abandonment, the abuse. A lot of people. Something I used to hear a lot growing up, and I hesitate to repeat it. Is people? Well, I never repeat it, but I used to hear people all the time say, "Oh, well, worse than that happened to me, or so and so, and they didn't kill them, so you just keep it moving."
Mm-hmm.
Or you know well, it didn't kill you, so it made you stronger. Just deal with it and keep going. And what that taught me as a bad habit or a coping skill that I had is that you have to ignore um extreme stress or any traumatic experiences you have and bury them, or become numb to them, to deal with, and just find a way to deal with it. But no one ever gave me the tools when I was growing up to deal with stressful, traumatic situations. Y'all want to speak on that? That was
Well,
kind of
I
a
think,
singular question.
well, I would definitely say that like you said, I've heard hurt people hurt people.
Hmm.
I've heard, I was always told you got to forgive and forget.
I
And I'm
heard that.
like, this is 3 generations deep and I'm supposed to forgive and forget. That
Hmm.
was a big struggle for me to be able to look the abuser that tarnished or drug my family down the hill in my eyes,
Hmm.
and look at him every day and see him and be told that I need to forgive and forget. And
Hmm.
that it almost like it was eating at a piece of my soul,
Hmm.
because I just felt like I wanted to do some things I can't even say on air.
Yeah, there
You
was
know,
no recourse, no recourse. Like,
just yeah,
you're just supposed to just deal with it, and that's just the
you
way
just
it
supposed
is.
you just supposed to eat it and just keep it going. And
Hmm.
and I just remember saying to myself, even as a child, like, this isn't life.
Hmm.
I feel angry every single day. I wake up and I look him in his face and he say something to me, or he make a comment, and it just made me so angry. And I said I used to say some things as a child that I was like, "Ooh, I don't even know. Boy, if words can cut, they was like little slices,
Hmm.
because that's how it made me feel,
Hmm.
And so I definitely understand that, and how that can take its toll on a person's psyche, especially as they go through life and they don't address that. I had to turn around and address those feelings and address those type of coping mechanisms that was bestowed upon me, and realize what it was doing to me. Those that's a is a very toxic mindset to have. To say, if we it's a real slave type of mentality. Like, we're supposed to endure the abuse and
Hmm.
the mistreatment, and we're
Hmm.
supposed to keep going. We're
Yes.
supposed to keep going.
Hmm.
And it's like, the best analogy that I give to anyone is like, we are like a bin, and you keep putting things in that bin. And when that bin starts to overflow, then what?
Hmm.
At that point, then what? The rest of it is just falling on the ground and spilling over. So you have to empty that bin. You have to release that, because
Yes.
that's not mine.
Hmm.
So when it comes down to, I do my best to not hold grudges.
Hmm.
I When I do forgive people now, I forgive for myself,
Hmm.
because you can't change a person, but you can change the way you handle things. And I forgive for myself, and I make sure that with my children, when I go back home and I talk to them about their day and I hear about their little drama, I make sure I talk about everything that they did, good or bad. And a lot of it's ghetto, because these kids, they be having these petty arguments. You like, bruh. But I asked them, well, what did you do? And then I asked them, well, do they think that they could have handled it? How do they think they could have handled it differently? And if that is the outcome that they really wanted in that situation. Because, even now, if you think about it, even now, if you have a disagreement with somebody or argue, let's say a friendly argument with somebody, and you feel like you giving them the work, you feel like you give them the bee's knees, right? And then later on, you sitting there to yourself.
Uh-oh, it froze. No.
Hmm.
Come on, StreamYard. Come on.
Hmm.
Uh, but we do have somebody in the chat while we wait. Hopefully it'll correct itself. We still in Mercury retrograde. Vera
I don't know what
says,
happened.
"Oh, I think Mercury retrograde kicked in. It froze."
I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna drink some water," because I was getting into it.
Yes. You remember what you said?
Yes, I was saying that when the kids come home, right?
Right. The children come home and
When they come home, I like to talk to them and figure out how they handle their situation and how they handle the day. And I even have those, I call it the Grinch conversations with myself. I'll be like, so do you think you could have handled that better? I'm like, probably. But it's always a work in progress, and just handling things different so that we not carrying this thing on, because your kids are always looking at you. Even if it's not your kids, other adults that are still learning as adults are still looking at you, and so I always recognize that, all right, I probably can't blow up, the way I want to. I can't say the things I want to say because I understand that people are looking at me, so, but that's my spill.
And we have Queen Vera DOS in the chat box. She commented, "It also stunts your mental growth, that type of abuse, mental or any abuse." Yes, it does. It does. And thank you for your comment. It not only stunts your mental growth, but abuse can also your emotional. It can stunt you emotionally. It can stunt your social skills and other things. She also said, "Back in the day, I had to learn to choose good people, good decisions early. All of them were not good because I'm still learning how to be a child." Okay, that makes sense. Dr. Ausar, did you want to speak on that? Her comments.
So her comment.
Can you all see the comments?
No.
Back in the day, the last one, back in the day, I had to learn to choose good people, good decisions early. All of them were not good because I'm still learning how to be a child.
Oh, as a child, okay, yeah, that camelbacks on what Kendra was saying. As a child, when you're experiencing mistreatment from adults, especially caregivers who are supposed to protect us and nurture us, and you're still learning, and developing who you are. And we're observing and learn. Children are like sponges. We're observing and we're learning from them. And then if they are mistreating you or neglecting and abandoning you, what are they teaching you?
I think what she's saying, in addition, is that she, as an adult, because of her traumatic experience as a child, never was able to fully have that be nurtured as a child. So hence, lots of times trauma causes um, a level of stunted growth.
Yes.
So many times when we respond to the events as adults, at least physical adults, we literally are taken back to those behaviors and things that we never learned to deal with at those early ages. Hence, we have we have what we call, like, a lot of brothers, like, we just finished a group with some brothers, and we talk about that inner child, healing that inner child, and that inner child often showing up in our relationships because the inner child who has never been nurtured has learned to act as an adult. So many times we had those of us who've been through trauma are walking around looking like physical grown people, but feel like we're acting the whole time. And so but what happens is when something reminds us of that experience, as we mentioned earlier, we act out, we have tantrums, we don't know how to, we have trouble in relationships, and because our earliest relationships were traumatic. So
Yes.
now I have what are trust issues.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, typically trauma breaks down your ability to trust other people.
It does.
Because if you couldn't trust your daddy, if you couldn't trust your mommy, if you couldn't trust those people closest to you, how can I trust this person? You must be untrustworthy. If my own parents weren't trustworthy, if
Mm-hmm.
my own relatives wasn't trustworthy, how can I trust you? So going back to your experience, so to your earlier question, I'm thinking, so many times you can't, the trauma is coming from the very parents that we're trying to speak to. So and sometimes they think that's what, if you talk to them, sometimes again it cloaks itself as as culture. So when you try to talk to the parents, many times they'll be like, well, look, I'm not trying to hear that white boy shit, excuse my language. I mean, that's just, so this is the stuff that's being said.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about white boy stuff. I don't even, but what I'm saying is, I'm talking about what is healthy. And so what I would say to your question is, we have to learn to be the secure bodies, or they need to be around secure people, because really we are more likely to be traumatized when we never had secure attachment figures.
Yes.
When we have secure attachment figures, we can go through a whole lot of stuff and never be traumatized. But if
Mm-hmm.
we never had the secure person that could grab us and hug us when something happened, or even if something happened and they went as crazy as we're looking for our cues from our parents and those elders and those people who are older than us. So then the thing is, we need to learn how to regulate our emotions. That's what trauma looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Many times we don't know how to regulate our emotions. We're either hypersensitive and hyper aroused, or many times we just shut it down, or a combination of both. We go from very high highs and very low lows, and they just all over the place. And then we can get to a place where we're very cold and shut off. So it's really about learning to regulate those emotions, because as children, our attachment figures teach us how to regulate our emotions. But if you weren't there, if I felt rejected, neglected, you never coddled me, because even in those times, many times they say don't coddle your children. They thought they were doing the right things, but really coddling your children teaches them how to regulate their emotions through you able to regulate your emotions. But if you're not able to regulate your emotions, you're more likely to perpetuate that trauma. So again, it goes back to that generation, passing down generationally.
It's a
So
cycle. It's a
yeah,
cycle.
so as
It
long,
is.
Well
yeah,
said.
Yes. Now, how did this is such a great discussion. I think I feel like we may have to do a two-part on this. But another question I wanted to ask is a lot of us are looking for way when we experience trauma and when we don't have recourse, we look for ways to numb ourselves or to kind of like disassociate from the traumatic experience. And that's where I think a lot of the substance abuse comes in. Um, would you agree, Dr. Ausar, with that?
what was that question again? I'm sorry.
Oh, when a person's experiencing traumatic situations, and a lot of times when they don't have any recourse, they often resort to something to numb themselves or to take their mind out of the situation or to soothe themselves, and that's where a lot of the substance abuse can come
Yeah,
from.
I can't think of his name. His name is Gabriel Mate or something like that. And he
Hmm.
speaks to most people who have substance abuse problems. I mean, well, if you really have, um, uh, you abuse it, you
Hmm.
abuse substances, there is trying to fill that void, that trauma, that empty space, that place, because that nurturing place, I never was cared for. I even heard people, even working with my own clients, you know, they would say some of them would never had smoked anything, never did anything, and the time they smoked herb for the first time and they dealt with, they said I felt like someone hugged me.
Mm.
And Gerber Mate speaks about that, but I never, but then literally hearing it from clients saying, I felt cared for.
Mm-hmm.
I felt, so yeah, it definitely, they say that when you're dealing with people with codependencies or co-occurrent disorders, you're really dealing with trauma. I honestly, even as a with just a single diagnosis or most depression, most anxiety, most any and almost everything, especially when it's very severe to less severe, is some type of early childhood experience. There's some
Yes,
level of trauma there.
it is.
And trauma doesn't mean that somebody actually did anything to you wrong or did this or did that. It really, you trauma, it has a lot to do with your perception as well.
Mm-hmm.
So 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 the society that we're in can even induce trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So even there's something called socialization where we teach our children, we raise them, we rear them up, and we socialize them to be safe in this world. And the research supports, especially as Black people, we try to socialize our children to be able to be to defend themselves in this white supremacist society or what have you. And if we're not careful, we can create trauma and fear and unsafety, and it'll backfire on us. So the research supports that if we teach them to watch out for a thing, we also need to speak to our victories. We also need to speak about our culture. We also need to speak about our richness. We also need to speak about our what they call. We also have to give celebratory messages. Other than that, we'll create someone who's hyper vigilant, frantic, anxious, depressed, all these type of things because we make the white man, not saying he ain't did nothing, but we're giving him even more power. So we
Mm-hmm.
have to also talk about our wins, our successes, and our celebrations.
Good, very good answer. All right. What are some steps that a person can take to begin the healing process? I know for me, it is the first step is acknowledging that you experienced trauma. That you know, growing up, I thought something was wrong with me because that's what I was being told. No one ever acknowledged, that some of the things that were happening were not healthy. Um, so I guess what are the steps to beginning the healing process? You
Mm.
like to share, Queen Kendra?
Well, I would say some really good steps I would get off the top of my head is one, yes, acknowledging that you have an issue.
Mhm.
That's with anything. And two, um, working towards shedding the fear and the stigma over those issues.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing I would say, I'm a huge advocate for therapy.
Mhm.
I will tell anybody, I don't care what stage I'm in my life. If I have to lay on somebody's couch,
Mm.
I don't care if all they do is sit there and listen to me. That's what I will do for my release. Now, of course, I've been blessed with a great circle where I can pick up the phone, I can call you, I can call,
Mhm.
I have people that I can talk to that can
Mhm.
give me some really good feedback. Um, but I definitely suggest therapy if you don't feel like you have someone that's in your immediate circle that can be a listening ear and maybe offer some suggestions of how you can proceed forward. The other thing is I would say to reach out to your local community about support groups that may be in relation to whatever your circumstance may be. If you are in the churches usually have a lot of they have a lot of committees and they got something for everything, you
Yeah.
know. And just trying to just finding a safe place to connect and to release in a safe space. And then also, if it is your circle that is keeping you in the same spot and you're feeling stagnant and you're holding on, it's bad to be holding on to things mentally and emotionally, and also to feel stagnant. And then your circle leaves you feeling even more stagnant. And so the biggest thing is you have to step outside of yourself And there may be even times where you have to be comfortable and content with being by yourself until you find yourself.
Hmm.
Good
So
answer.
I would definitely, those are all of the things that I've done personally. It's like you cannot, everybody can't, doesn't have the money or doesn't have the space to do a sabbatical where they go on a journey to find themselves, where they can just kind of go and experience different things. So you have to do it however that may look like for you. For me, it may be a day or two, or it might be a couple of hours a day, and I'll go and I'll just go sit out in the park, or I'll go and have a little mini adventure by myself, or just do something that makes me feel like I'm ready to release or to distress.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of I'm sure Dr. Dennis he got a whole plethora, but that's what I do. That's my that's those
Mm-hmm.
are a few of my cues. If somebody was to ever tell me, Kendra, I am the person that everybody calls for. I'm like their therapist. But aside from that, those are some of the things that I definitely do myself and highly recommend. Go if you have a job that offers free therapy because they want to make sure that your mental health is legit and secure. You need to make sure that thing is secure as a lace front. You need to go talk to them because it's very important. It's vital to your health.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I
So,
got.
well, yeah, I think that was a wonderful. That was wonderful.
Those wonderful answers. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
If so, if I want just to add to it, is I think that I just have to say this. So, one of the things in our community that really, really frustrates me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not say even frustrated. I want to say it hurts me is that people play on our trauma.
Mm.
Mm,
And we're often led to and attracted to that which will hurt us again. Because
Okay.
trauma throws off the way that you really see reality.
mm.
So
That's
we, huh?
that's a discernment thing.
Mm.
Mhm. And
Being able
so,
to discern.
and then many times again, we start to say we have this intuition, but our intuition, we can't even trust it when we've been traumatized. We say,
True.
and then but people who've been through trauma like to say that they're the most intuitive people on earth.
Mm-hmm.
However, I know it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
We have to realize that many times we're just our vision is skewed.
Mm-hmm.
So we need help. But
Yes.
sometimes when we've been through so much trauma, we know every damn thing. But let me say
Mm-hmm.
this again: we all been through something.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to realize that many times can't nobody tell us anything because we're afraid to trust people. Again,
Mm-hmm.
so we have to one learn to regulate our emotions because I have to learn to regulate my emotions so that I can go deep into the trauma. I can't go into trauma or deal with trauma unless I have some tools. So I have to learn some tools. I have to
Mm-hmm.
learn breathing, some mindfulness. I have to learn what is it called? Some visualizations. I have to
Mm-hmm.
learn some breathing, some sense to bring me back to some grounded state. I have to learn to have a person that I can trust in front of me if I'm going to go into that deep work where they can help ground me. So hence we have to learn to ground ourselves. And I ain't talking about the stuff that we like to go and we just look like we grounded ourselves and we just go to the beach and we go out and we put all the white on. I appreciate all that. Don't get it twisted. I got my all my stuff on and all this, right? So look, don't think I'm teasing. I mean, I meditate, I do all of that, but I'm saying really do it, not just look like you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Make it a part of your life, not just for taking your pictures or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
Be a
because we
part of your practice. Practice what you preach.
because most of
Agreed.
us really can't slow this thing down right here when we've been through trauma, and
Yep.
we act like we meditate, and we know we ain't meditating.
They sleep.
Yeah, we
They
we
sleep.
know,
Sleep. They,
but I mean, as Queen Tamara said, though, some of us have done a great job of dissociating.
mm-hmm.
That's a form of meditation, and that's why I'm saying also we got to be careful with those type of meditations that take us out of our bodies, because that's an escape. I'm not saying it'll have its taste in its time, but see, people get over on you when they take you out of your body so you won't feel it. Again, I'm not dealing with it. You deal with trauma inside of here.
Mm-hmm.
You deal with trauma, Sister Kendra.
Well, yes. Well, I
You,
was going to say, well, this is where I interject a plug in a moment. So
okay.
that's what Queen Tamara is for with astral healings. Um, where she does where she performs spiritual healings and yoga meditations and mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And she also does the healing of the hands, and she balances those chakras. And so we've done some work ourselves. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely here to tell you that Sister Queen Tamara, she is definitely a tool. Not to say that you are a tool, but you have a place here in that process.
I
And
say.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you, Dr. Dennis,
Mm-hmm.
So,
that you have to be very careful to heal. You have to heal here and here. You forgot this right here. You have
well,
to heal here and here.
I'm saying all of this. No,
Yeah,
no.
you got all of this,
All
but
of
right
this.
All
here,
of it.
yeah, right here, you got to deal with the mind. You have to be ready
Mm-hmm.
to release. Your heart has to be ready to release.
Mm-hmm.
So when you speak those words out, it come from your heart. It's not just happening all in your mind. That's where you disassociate. So we're not trying to separate ourselves from our reality. We're trying to heal our realities.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you heal your realities and you let that thing go and you release it back into the earth, you heal your line.
Mm-hmm.
You heal those that's before you and those that come after you. And that is true healing. And that
Mm.
right there is what a lot of people are not prepared for because it takes work.
So, Sister Kendra, I'm gonna take it back now. I didn't give let me take the mic back.
Well,
Don't drink no water.
Dr. Kendra passed the mic.
so,
And
so,
thank you, beloved Vera. She said, right or afraid to deal with the truth. Absolutely.
absolutely, and hence,
Acknowledging the truth is the first step in the healing process.
hence, we've been played on by even what we call spirituality and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say we gotta learn to discern, but nonetheless, get back to the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Regulate our emotions. We have to go through the process of regulating our emotions because we are afraid to deal with that trauma because it can have us decompensate. It can take us back to a sorrowing, a place of sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to learn to regulate our emotions. Know we can deal with it. We can face it. We can look at it in the eyes because trauma has us having thoughts and fragmented thoughts and things like that, and just pictures popping up or just things that we just don't want to face. Hence, so we try to tuck it away,
Mm-hmm.
hide it, shove it, oppress it, suppress it, repress it, and then it pops up out of nowhere. But if we learn to regulate our emotions, we can go into that process and get a more complete thought and then now metabolize, or what clinicians call process the trauma, allow it to go through our body, let it happen, accept it, experience it, and let it metabolize. To now is more manageable. If we thought about it, if it comes up, it is not controlling us. Rather, we feel it, but I can deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. But with going back, the last thing Sister Kendra said was fine. She's an advocate of therapy. I am as well. And find someone that can help you feel secure.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Also, I would also like to touch on the substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of people abuse drugs, not just because of their traumas, but because of generational curses.
Hmm.
Things that there's something about in what I've witnessed is that I've seen there's a father who drinks, and then a child that wasn't even raised by that father who drinks in
Mm-hmm.
excess. and to find out that the great grandfather was a drunkard in
Mm-hmm.
excess.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, well, why does that happen? And it definitely brings me back to the generational curses and how those things happen. And also not only just parenting styles, but also things that we are all connected by spirit with our past, with our parents, with their parents, because their blood flows through our veins. And so that's what goes back to healing yourself, and learning other ways to handle situations, or to handle stresses and trauma, since that's the topic that we're speaking on. But more specifically, stressors. You had a rough day at work. Does that mean that you should drink in excess? Probably not. Exercise. You do something else that's a little bit more healthy to
Mm-hmm.
practice a healthier lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that is not that isn't always introduced or easily talked about, because it's a lot easier to go to the liquor store to pick up a bottle. It's a lot easier to roll up a joint and smoke it and release, or to go out and party. And because there's a whole lot of lonely souls out there. I mean, I was out there. I still love a good dance. I still love a good party, but to go out there and just to mingle with other people who are also, it's like a hospital, it's like a meeting place for the sick. So when you have all of these things happening, but you don't have a healthy way to release, that is how they release, thus creating those substance abuses, even sexual abuse, and how some women, there are women and men, how they will go out and they will just do anything with anybody.
Become
And
hypersexual.
they're hypersexual. Why are they hypersexual? Because that's how they release. That fills a void, as
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Dennis said, that it fills a void that that is there, and they don't have a healthy way to handle these things.
Mm-hmm.
So then it goes back to, well, what I don't well, I know that's not this conversation about what we would do as a community to help these people to create awareness, but that's where creating awareness of how to that there are other things that are out there to do, being of service, um exercising, meditative yoga or regular yoga, playing basketball, play with your kids, or some type of something to decom the de-stress at the end of the day. And I think
Yes,
that is a conversation that isn't had enough. That
I
also
agree.
is a huge part. It's a very huge factor in how a person overcome their traumas. That isn't discussed enough, in my opinion.
Yes, and we need to create a healing community. Like you said, find someone that you can trust, or the um, Queen in the chat box. She said she had to cry to the Holy Spirit. If you don't have anybody to trust in your life, or you feel that you don't have anyone to trust to talk to about or to share with to help you with healing, you could put it in prayer. Talk to God. Talk to the Holy Spirit.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
that's a great beginning.
Oh man, it's
That's
power
a
in the
great
tongue.
go-to to help you with your healing journey. I always advocate, I think in my other videos, to have a spiritual practice. If you're
Hmm.
somebody that doesn't have one, or you don't do it enough, do that more, because that will help. That's another tool that you can use to help in the healing process and help you with your healing journey, is tapping into spirit, whatever that looks like for you. It's different for each and every person, but that's a great way to heal, to help you with the healing process.
I totally agree. It's power
Hmm.
in the words. People don't
Yep.
really, I don't think people really understand the true essence of how powerful words are. It's
Hmm.
like I say, words is like a text message. When you send it, you can't take it back. You could delete it, but it's still out there. And
That's
so
true.
as we speak, when we speak, I tell my kids all the time, when you speaking on somebody, be mindful to speak life, not death. They're like, well, I'm not killing nobody. Well, you can kill somebody's momentum, you can kill somebody's spirit, or you can damper somebody's spirit just off of what you say. And
Yes.
so even in your own healing, it's and when you affirm daily, or you affirm to yourself that you're going to get through this and that you are going to heal, or you pray to whomever you pray to, And you just pray that someone is sent to you to help you along in that journey. When the student is ready, a teacher will appear. So
Absolutely.
that is very powerful. There's power in words. It doesn't matter what place you are. If you pick up the phone, somebody will answer.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
in 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 addition, spiritual traditions, religious traditions, if they don't trigger or further exacerbate, because some of us has been traumatized by these institutions
Hmm.
or what have you as well.
Yes.
It's a good place, to find something. As one of my mentors say, be more. We have to be intentional. He said we're past the stage of not being intentional any longer. And lots of times, what we do it when we've been through certain levels of trauma, we lack certain levels of discipline. So what these spiritual and religious traditions many times can help us do is to learn discipline, learn a way of living. I mean, as long as if it's healthy and is adaptive, it can benefit us.
Hmm. I
Agreed.
And
agree.
spirituality
Hmm.
has also, even in my research, as it pertains to race-based trauma, and race-based trauma is just trauma. you know, um, meditation it has shown to be a factor to help mitigate traumatic symptoms.
Yes, it does. It definitely helped me.
Mhm.
It
Well, I
definitely
think
helped me.
I feel like a lot of times people mistake or they confuse religion versus spirituality.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
I put those in two different categories.
Mhm.
I do feel like we are, as Black people, we have been traumatized sitting in that church 7 days a week to that pastor hooping and hollering all day long, and we just want to go and watch cartoons.
Mhm.
And then even as an adult, you realize that you can't even remember a sermon, and it was all over that Bible.
Mhm.
But spirituality is really tuning into self. It is going
I
inward.
agree. I agree.
It's it is going inward and planting and you becoming more connected with the world around you, and that isn't the world around you. It's a bigger To me, spirituality is way bigger than religion because it supersedes that. So when you tap into spirituality or you tap into spirit, meditation is tapping into spirit. You're not tapping in necessarily to a religion. That's A religion is more so formality and rituals. Spirituality is tapping into yourself when you meditating and you listening to your breathing and you feeling everything in your body move. You feeling where everything at. You finding the pain in your pinky toe.
Mhm.
That is you being connected to self. And when you connected to self and you start healing, you start being more aware of all of the things that are occurring in your body, and also being aware of those traumas. You're able to heal better when you are connected to self. So you don't have to be plugged into a church, in my opinion, in order to have a sense of self or a strong spiritual base. Because spirituality has it to me, it definitely sets aside. It could be a part of the machine. It can also run independently as well.
Good. Very good. I agree with that. All right. This has been so enlightening. It really has. I think it's been a conversation that's needed to be discussed. Oftentimes, talking about anything dealing with abuse or any kind of trauma is like the elephant in the room that everybody wants to pretend is not there. That it's the ant. It's not really elephant, but it is. So I think this was really informative, um, and a nurturing conversation because it was just like it just kind of flowed, and how we address on so many different topics pertaining to trauma or needing to regulate emotions and things like that. Thank you for beloved Vera also in the chat room with her insight, and for tuning in and for watching. She said this needs to go viral. I say yes, it does, because it's something that needs to be talked about. We witness people's trauma every day. And like Dr. Sar said, that some people actually, monopolize off of that. And this is very unfortunate because these people who they're monopolizing off of, they're not getting the healing that they need. They're not they're just not getting the healing that they need, and it's creating another unhealthy behavior pattern. And then it's something that the next generation is watching, and people are watching, observing, and we really need to have conversations around healing,
I agree. I totally
generational
agree.
healing, family healing, emotional, spiritual, sexual, all forms of healing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
I agree.
yes,
It's you gotta take that. It's you keep tapping at the glass, it's gonna break eventually. But some people are afraid to
yes,
start tapping.
yes.
You gotta
Keep
tap
bringing it
in.
up. Try to tap in. That's right. Any closing remarks? We were
Well, you can go, Dr. Dennis. I'll finish.
Okay. So closing remarks. I think I'll be remiss if I don't touch back on that spiritual systems that, as I mentioned earlier. And notice I said systems.
mhm,
Because I mean I've been around, all a lot of circles. And a lot of times people, and I did a whole dissertation on race based. What is it? Measuring the uh, the relationship between race based trauma,
mhm,
spirituality, and Black identity.
Mm.
Now, when I say spiritual systems, I'm saying this to be clear that lots of us we have multiple definitions for things. And I agree with the definition of spirituality that is used. Spirituality is, more of a quote unquote, some people say more of a personal thing. But when we talk about spiritual systems, a lot of us, especially in these Afrocentric, Pan African, whatever, you might not, we don't even think that we're in some system. We say we're spiritual, but we're following something, even if it's Kemetic, if it's Kemet, if it's this, if it's that. However, we have been abused by these systems that claim to be spirituality. We've
mhm,
been abused by, some people say they're spiritual, and they've been abused by transcendental meditation and all types of things. So I want to distinguish between those two, because lots of times people say, "Oh no, let's beat up on religion. Let's beat up on religion. I'm spiritual, and we're spiritual. We're independent, and spiritual is a personal thing. But this is how you become spiritual. So that now becomes a religion. You're just not calling it a religion. But in that vein, I'm saying don't allow people, learn to trust yourself.
that's a
Absolutely.
good answer.
Learn to trust yourself, because I understand when we've been through trauma, we do not know how to trust ourselves, even though we're purporting and acting as if we do. Now, it's not a problem. I also want to normalize that. There's not a problem to get a mentor, even if you haven't been through trauma. We should all have elders and mentors, because my mother will be my mother until she dies, and even when she dies, and even when I die, I'll always have elders. I'm always will be here to learn something, and that's a difficult thing when we've been through some level of trauma. But I'm suggesting many times, and that our system has been thrown off to such a degree that we're attracted to people who are going to perpetuate trauma on us. So we have to learn how to trust, who we can trust, and that who those who we are attracted to many times are the very ones that will perpetuate the trauma. And nobody can tell you, because we close our minds up. We close our minds up, and we saw all the red flags. We see all the red flags. We ignore the red flags. We get mad at people for telling us things. All these type of things. But we got to tap in to our spirituality, the true sense that we're talking about here, and not spiritual systems. We have to tap into mentors that can be trusted. We have to not ignore the red flags. We have to. It's okay not to know. It's okay to be thrown off, and just being authentic and accepting help is probably the greatest thing you can do. Peace and power.
I thought you was gonna say love and soul and hair grease or something, but I like that one. Peace and power.
Power. Yes, that's good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, both of you. This was so informative, and I pray that everyone that sees this motivate them to seek the healing that they need. Learn to trust themselves. Learn to tap in, as Sister Kendra said, to themselves and to their higher power and to their spirituality, and all above all, everything that we said this evening. Make sure you love and nurture yourself through your healing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Good, good. All right, so I enjoyed it. Thank you so much, both of you, for blessing us with your insight and with your presence and for your timelessness.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. I I know my kids are probably like, what
Hmm.
with mommy? But this conversation was
They
very,
supposed to be in the bed.
they are definitely supposed to be in the bed, but I can hear little feet running and
Okay.
I can hear her terrorizing the big ones.
Okay.
But I must say that this conversation was very satisfying. It was very
Good,
enlightening.
thanks. Thank you.
I
Likewise.
appreciate both of you guys' perspectives. I think it was very informative, and I hope that whoever ears that this conversation touch, I hope that it triggers a
Mhm.
call to action.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So thank you all for sharing, and much love and peace and abundance to you both.
Yes, and I'm gonna do a plug. You guys can check me out on
Yes.
I don't know, I think I have Spotify. I got one. Greg
Put
got
it
me.
in the chat too.
Oh yeah, it's Love, Sex, and Motherhood. Where it's my podcast, and I talk about all things. Nothing's off the table. We talk about it
Okay.
all. I only got one episode, but I'm working on it. These kids be wearing me out.
That's fine. Fine. You gotta start somewhere.
I
Good.
mean, I'm so proud of you, Tamar. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of
Thank
you for
you.
doing this. I remember when it was a conversation and she was walking me down, Dr. Dennis, but she did it. She did it. I'm so proud of her.
Thank you.
Everything that she's doing right now is a direct manifestation of what she wanted to do. She manifested it, and this is the byproduct, and I couldn't be more proud.
Thank you.
Okay.
I love you, sis.
Love you too, sis. Thank you.
Appreciate sharing the platform with you all.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing me on.
Thank you.
Nice to
All right.
meet you.
Likewise. Peace
Thank
and
you.
power.
Peace and power,
And
everyone
hair
out
grease
there.
and all that for you, Sister Kendra.
Thank you. Hair grease.
All right, peace.
Peace, everyone.